Platformers are one of the most popular gaming genres out there. Mario, the most well-known character in gaming, is a platformer. We've been getting platformers since the beginning of time, and we've gotten a lot since then. But not everyone does it right. So I'm here to break down how to make a good platformer. And where we're going to start, as previously mentioned, is the beginning of time to the first platformer ever, Donkey Kong. When this was released, the world was on fire. Like Pac-Man, so much of the enjoyment came from its simplicity. You jump over the barrels and climb the ladders, then you win. Easy enough. But as you keep going, the levels get progressively harder and harder until it's like, is it even possible to beat this thing? And the answer is no. You're not supposed to be able to beat it, so that you keep coming back and spending all your lemonade money to try to beat your high score. If anyone could do it, it'd be going out of business. So when the gaming scene shifted back over to consoles, developers saw the strategy of structure and said, yeah, that works. Let's do it in these games you pay a lot more money for. And so all these platformers from back then are chock full of impossible jumps, bullshit enemy spawns, and an unrealistic amount of skill required to get past some of these levels. The Donkey Kong spin-off game, Super Jumpman Bros. 3, is full of these difficulty spikes. Some levels you'll run right through in seconds, and others you'll be stuck on for an hour. When there were only a couple of Mario games out, it was obvious why so many people played them, but nowadays when there's such a big library, you're not exactly going to boot up your NES to give them a go for fun. And it's because these developers made their games insanely hard to keep you playing them for as long as possible, but little did they know, people don't like getting their ass handed to them in the most bullshit ways possible. There are a lot of games out there that are meant to pound you into the ground and make you feel like nothing, so that once you overcome the challenge, it'll be the best feeling ever. But when the challenge is a regular level but just 10 times the amount of enemies, it feels like the developers were just trying to make you waste your time with something so trivial rather than wanting you to master it. But even so, there's still a good chunk of people who take up the gauntlet anyways and find these bullshit sections fun, which is why some of these platformers have still survived to this day, like Ghosts and Goblins and Super Meat Boy. Even getting over it is teetering on that line of being bullshit and genius, very similar to Dark Souls. It gives you this stupid ass movement system where you're this idiot in a cauldron trying to scale a mountain with a hammer and your mouse controls the end of that hammer. This much mouse control isn't normally required of games, so most people aren't used to it when they go in and spend the first hour trying to get past the tree. A lot of it does seem like rage bait, with parts that'll take you all the way back to the beginning, but some of the fun of getting over it is mastering such an unconventional way of travel. But plenty of platformers manage to make you struggle without kicking your face in the mud, like Hollow Knight and Celeste, where you climb a mountain in the normal people way, by flying using a magic feather. Celeste's difficulty is pretty challenging, but the way they spice up levels is by adding new mechanics every once in a while. There's so many cool and creative ways to get you to interact with the levels. You can dash and climb with stamina, and then it just builds from there with these traffic light guys, the space block, the bubbles. All of them force you to adapt your platforming skills to every new challenge. As soon as you know it, you're chaining them all together and you become the platforming master. Hollow Knight plays with the difficulty in a different way, particularly in the White Palace. If you get enough Dream Essence, you'll be able to go to a section called the White Palace, and in it gives you this ass-kicking platforming section. But because you've been playing the game for so many hours now and gotten used to the controls, it can throw you right into the challenge straight away. There are multiple long platforming sections that make you go without a checkpoint. You just gotta have the skill to make precise jumps and think on your toes with the moveset. The joy of the difficulty doesn't come from the use of game mechanics, but rather just pinning you up against a gauntlet of hard jumps you have to nail with little to no mistakes. With all this talk about challenging platformers, you'd think they're the only ones out there, but there are plenty of platformers that give you a great time without requiring immense skill. They can do this by delivering spectacular visuals and score. Rayman Legends isn't the hardest game on planet Earth, and it doesn't have the craziest move and ore mechanics, although the Froggy is pretty cool. But the background and set pieces are so gorgeous, they look like they were painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And the score is so loud and catchy it had me humming the songs while playing through the levels. It also uses this great sense of movement. There are some levels where you're just sprinting through while jumping and hitting enemies on the beat. Its style and flow are enough to overshadow its difficulty. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. I don't know if I would call it easy. There are definitely some parts that trip me up, but the atmosphere and setting are so fresh and immersive. This isn't the new Super Mario Bros. Games where you're jumping on non-contextual floating platforms and every section looks identical. In Donkey Kong, every level has its own unique style and story to it. In this one, you're bouncing on the fruit jello. In this, the platforms are the hot air balloons. In this one, the level takes place in the crashed airplane. There's the rocket levels, the minecart levels, and the water levels, each one with an insane attention to detail and background. It Takes Two really knows how to nail that magic and beauty. Each level takes place in different parts of the house but shrunken down, and in each one you have your own little power-up. They're all so unique. The symbol is my favorite because I can be Captain America, but there's also the nails, the fidget spinner, the magnets. Every location is so gorgeous with the style and tone changing throughout. The treehouse level is the absolute pinnacle of forest beauty, especially when you're flying through the woods on the airplane and the entire set looks hand-drawn. The clock level is so reserved and gothic, it looks like Dracula lives here. The snow globe has this frozen village that you slowly have to break open to release a winter wonderland. And the amount of goofiness separates it even further from your normal platformer. There's so much camp that somehow fits right within the world. You've got the funny talking frogs, the army squirrels, the glow stick nightclub, you kill a monkey, throw a baby elephant off of a building, suck the fucking eyes off of a vacuum. Mario Wonder has the biggest variety of gameplay shifts I've seen and probably ever. Each level is like your typical 2D Mario level, but now they've added new stuff like these hippos and bulls and this big fish. And they got some new power-ups too, like the bubble one and the elephant. These alone, mixed with the devs' great level design, is already a recipe for a masterpiece. But in each level, there's this thing called a Wonder Seed, and each time you pick it up, it puts a huge spin on the level. And it's different for every level. There's one where it turned top down, one where the bulls were going crazy, this one where you become a puff cloud, and this one where you become a Goomba. Having these Wonder Seeds that switch up the level in its own unique way makes jumping into them so exciting because you have no idea what the team cooked up next. Tons of platformers don't need to be difficult to be great. So many of them rely on the creativity and atmosphere to provide a fun experience. But some platformers get a little too carried away with making it easy. Kirby is the biggest example of this for me, but I could probably lump Sackboy in there too. Back when I was in 7th grade, I decided to spend $60 on Kirby Star Allies, and it was probably the biggest waste of money of my life. I breezed through all the levels like it was a walking simulator and never touched the game again. Then when Kirby and the Forgotten Land came out, I heard good things and decided to give it a shot, but it was pretty much the same problem with 3D. Both games let Kirby suck in enemies and obtain their powers, and even stuff like traffic cones and vending machines, but you were never presented with a challenge hard enough to use them in any creative ways. Sure, there are some little puzzles, but when it comes to combat, no matter what power I have, I can just mow down the enemies and bosses. The art style of the levels are cool, especially in Forgotten Land. It's cool to go through this broken down apocalyptic city as this cute little puffball, but it doesn't make up for the lack of any stimulation. I got through the first world and gave up on it because I would have been half asleep playing the rest of the game. When creating this type of fun, atmospheric platformer, you've got to be able to understand how easy you should make it before it bottoms out and doesn't become fun anymore. This is interesting because there's a great amount of games that you pretty much just idly walk through with the occasional puzzles, but they have a different intention. Games like Limbo, Little Nightmares, and Inside don't have 100 levels jam-packed with power-ups and cool game mechanics. You pretty much just walk through as the story tells itself. Platformers are the only genre of games where the platforming doesn't even need to be good for the game to be enjoyable. Sure, there are plenty of spots for engagement like puzzles and stealth sections, but none prove difficult enough to be a genuine nuisance. Well, most of them. You'd think that these type of games would be a snooze fest, but me and plenty of others adore these titles for the weird and thought-provoking journeys they take us on. That being said, the difficulty of making these types of games isn't as simple as, what cool item they should be able to use in this section. It's more about fleshing out the setting and story to be one that's worth telling without any dialogue. You've got to be able to create an immersive and entertaining experience without much of a real challenge, but just through the environment and visual storytelling. There are a bunch of games that give you a great time but doing the complete opposite though, where the movement is where it's at. In OlliOlli World, you're just cruising through levels on a kick-ass skateboard drifting and shit. It feels so clean. Pizza Tower, you're just sprinting through levels as fast as you can, not a second wasted. If you hit a wall, you're back on your feet in no time, skirting to change directions and bouncing off the walls. It's a non-stop thrill ride that you never want to get off. And Sonic, you didn't think I'd forget about Sonic, did you? Well, not Sonic Mania at least, I don't know about these ones. In Sonic Mania, the idea is that you're walking around killing enemies most of the time, getting through parts of the level with all these cool new features they've added. All the levels have these separate paths that branch off and come back together, so if you die you can try a different way if that one isn't working out. Maybe sometimes you'll get a little boost of speed, the whole time waiting for when you'll be able to blast through a section. And once you do, it feels amazing. There's a huge sense of momentum as you rocket along the path at top speeds, absolutely zooming by any challenge. The deprivation of this speed makes having it awesome. In games where movement is the center, flow is a key aspect of them. I talked a bit about it with Rayman when you're jumping and hitting to the rhythm of the music, and even in other instances like when you're running through a level in Mario doing precise jumps so that you don't lose your momentum. But especially in these games where the goal is to keep that speed for as long as you can, they give you chains of jumps and bounces to keep the movement satisfying and fun, with a few enemies in your way to challenge you but not too much where it's constantly slowing you down. Platformers with movement like this are probably some of my favorites. Now today we've talked about hard platformers, easy platformers, story-based platformers, and movement-based platformers. But what's the series you think of first when someone says platformer? That's right, the 3D Mario games. I've gotta be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of these games. I still like them all a lot, but I think the one that I played first really made the rest seem tamer in comparison, but I'll talk about that one later. The first, Super Mario 64, I'm sure felt a lot better when it first came out. I mean, how could it not? It came out almost 30 years ago. It's hard to make a game that old age well, especially when it's primarily movement based. It's easier to make a timeless game that's based around a good story because the narrative can't be held back by technology and development. Graphics and cutscenes have gotten better of course, but you can still create a great story without those. But when it comes to 64, the movement is still really fun, but a little clunky at times. I don't know if it's just the Switch port, but I can promise you I like this game a lot more than if I'd played it on the N64 controller, because what the hell is this? The movement and different ways you can use it has since been improved upon a lot, as well as there being not the best playground to be able to use it. There's about a 50-50 split of cool levels with a fun theme, and a bunch of platforms with little context to them. It's hard criticizing this game when back then I know that this was revolutionary, but the 3D Mario games have gotten so much better that I can't lie to you and tell you at the time of my life. The same goes for Mario Galaxy. There's so many cool ideas in here like hopping from planet to planet, gravity swapping, and countless more, but I think there's 3 gripes I have that really slow the experience down. The first is that constantly going in and out of levels really halts the pacing. I know that 2D Mario games do this, but I forget that more because it's just 2 seconds to run in the next and press start. But the motion controls makes it kind of annoying to go to the next area. That's more of a nitpick though. If these next 2 are better, I'd brush it off. The others kind of go hand in hand, and it's that the movement isn't nearly as fun and quick as I'd like it to be. Other Mario games you can bounce around and everything, but in this one, your cool unique move is the spin attack. It's helpful for combat, but when it comes to actual movement, it only acts as this little jump boost. You can't do any cool platforming change with it or anything, and it doesn't have any room for improvement. In these Mario games, the movement is so fun because there's a large margin for improvement. Once you play enough, you can do all these cool moves that skip whole areas and stuff, but in Galaxy, there's not really any room for that improvement. You can't really get better at the movement, you can just die less. In the same vein, the power-ups it gives you in here are cool but also pretty slow. Most notably, the bee and the spring. Both of them are interesting but a real slog to use. You fly at about 2 miles an hour with the bee, and the spring goes so slow. I know a criticism like movement isn't fast enough seems like a lame reason to not enjoy the game as much, but half the draw for me in these is the fact that you can mash the moveset to be able to use the whole section as a platforming Ninja Warrior course. 3D World also doesn't have the craziest movement, but it makes up for this with 1, better power-ups, and 2, a more dense level design. In the Galaxy, a lot of the levels are pretty open and have a little jumps here and there, but in 3D World it just nails you with so many different cool challenges over and over. There's a huge variety of different levels like the Mario Kart level and the Boo level, and you get to be a little cat. The whole experience is a blast, but the one thing that holds it back is the fixed camera. I think a fixed camera in a 3D platformer is a bad idea, because when it comes to jumps and narrow paths, it's hard to control your character so precisely. The depth perception and angle kind of screw up exactly where you're going to go when you hit the joystick. It's the same problem that Crash Bandicoot has, but for some reason when it comes to Crash, the fixed camera is in the worst place physically possible, which is right behind him. When you're doing these running levels, it's a fucking dice roll whenever you try and jump over the gaps. And it's especially bad when you have to make these precise jumps, like on the bridge level. When you place the fixed camera like this, all sense of enjoyment goes out the window. Luckily in the expansion for 3D World that came out back in 2021, Bowser's Fury, not only does it have a free camera, fun moveset, awesome platforming, but it's also an open world. This all sounds great, but I actually don't like this game that much. Don't like it is always a strong word when it comes to 3D Mario games, because I do like all of them. It's just below average of my expectations. All the challenges are too spread out and they all look alike, so when I'm trying to find one I need to do or haven't done before, I'm just riding around this huge open space in Yonkadingo going from island to island checking to see if I've done it before. The whole thing is pretty tedious. Not only that, but the floor is water, so whenever you fall you gotta make the slow swim back to the beginning. And it's funny how self-aware Mario devs are now, that they've made swimming in a Mario game an official punishment for losing. I'd rather just die and respawn at the beginning. This game has a lot going for it, but just a couple of things that seem like minor annoyances can diminish the fun of the game. And I think that pretty much sums up most of the games I've talked about. When it comes to 3D Mario games, there's surprisingly a lot of moving parts to make the games as good as they want them to be, and if you mess one up like giving Mario a spin move or setting your game in the middle of the fucking ocean, it's pretty hard to nail every aspect. Luckily, there is one that does everything perfectly. My favorite platformer of all time, Super Mario Odyssey. Also coincidentally the one I played first. This game is so good. You heard me glaze it in my atmosphere video, and now I'm back at it again. Everything the other games do wrong, this one does right. The movement is so clean, now you got Cappy to go along with it. I think the reason I just like the spin move in Galaxy so much is because I saw what a great addition Cappy was, and it was nothing in comparison. With your hat, you can chain together all these crazy moves. There's a big margin for improvement, way bigger than any other Mario game. You can jump, throw it, dive into it, throw it again, and dive. It allows you to turn into anything you see in the game. The gameplay of what you can do changes up so much whenever you throw the hat on something. And with this expanded moveset, it gives a much bigger, denser, and vertical playground to use it in. The world has a density of a 3D world level. There's so many obstacles and challenges packed into here to be able to flex your platforming skills. The music and atmosphere I was talking about earlier with Donkey Kong and Rayman is all here. There are kingdoms in here that will just floor you with its environment. Have you ever wanted to be able to jump around a city as Mario? Well, now you can. It fixes every problem a platformer could have and more. The great thing about platformers is that you can have so many drastically different types, and they can all be equally incredible in their own way. Sonic Mania? Let's get its speed and momentum down first, then we'll add in a killer soundtrack. Inside, let's figure out what story we want to tell, then build the world around it. Mario Wonder? What are the craziest, most insane ideas you have? Alright, that's it, we're putting those in. It's just about figuring out what aspect you want to hone in on, perfect it, and then build out the rest from there. Follow these simple steps, and you'll come out with the second best game of 2017. How to make a good platformer, ladies and gentlemen.